Awesome. Hey, Peter. Super excited to have you on the Full Stack SEO podcast. You recently joined the Full Stack SEO team, and super excited for that. And I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, and I was just scrolling down for days. Like you have like such a phenomenal experience. Exit after exit, then getting to consulting, then joining another company, gets acquired, then raising a 125 million Series D round, and I mean like you've done a lot, right? And we'll get into that, like kind of like the different points in your career, the decisions you made. But the first question I love to ask is, has your career, because like any entrepreneur or business person would love to have this kind of like, that's what everyone dreams of, right? The exits and all the stuff that comes with it. When you look at this, it looks like a straight line on the up and up, and absolutely like amazing career. In behind the scenes reality, has it been as fulfilling as it looks on paper?
That's a great question. Well, first and foremost, it's not been a straight line. Not even close, right? Not even close. I think if you would have told me at various points in my career I'd be where I am right now, I both would be incredibly excited and maybe also incredibly disappointed, right? Because it's just, you
Oh
approach it
yeah.
every day with this vision in your mind of how you think it's going to be and how you think it's going to go, and it never is. Like,
Mm,
and one of the first lessons I learned, and actually I think this comes down to, wasn't enjoyable, is really like trying not to carry too much weight of expectation in what I'm doing. Right? There's a difference between
yeah.
having a dream and having goals and having aspirations and just saying I'm only going to be happy if I have X. And I look back now, I've been now an entrepreneur and executive for 30 years actually, and so the LinkedIn list is so long, Yannick. But
Yeah.
honestly, I look back with a lot of pride, right? Because even
Mm,
the successes are obvious, but even the successes, I look back on them with pride for things other than the exit or the financial outcome, right? At the end of
yeah.
the day, I'm probably most proud of, the tens of people I gave their first meaningful role to in one of my companies who are now
Mm,
executives and successful leaders on their own. I'm probably most
yeah.
proud of the impact I had on my customers and on their lives and on their day to day.
Mm,
I'm probably most proud of then the journey itself. Like what did we do? Because at the end of the day, we start these companies, we run these companies, we have this sort of day to day mission, but we spend more time with each other than the people we choose to love. And so
mm.
if you can't have an experience in the day to day that it becomes fulfilling in and of itself, then probably you need to find another role or do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. In your career, you've had the opportunity to have, I think I was counting, and it was like five exits or something, or along that, like whether it's been like your companies that you've had, like taken from zero to exit, or joining a company that then later on you take to another level, then it gets acquired. But it sounds like, this has happened several times throughout your career, which is phenomenal. The question I have is that, are you really good at picking these companies and looking at the market, or have you uniquely figured out how to take a company from one point to the next point in a way that you've
Absolutely not.
replicated it across,
I'm
right?
batting about 500, which means I'm swinging at stuff I really shouldn't have, right? And
Yeah.
so, I'm not good at picking. I think I have a couple of superpowers. One of them is I'm incredibly strategic in how I think, and I'm a systemic thinker. Like I don't
Hmm.
I'm very good in the practical, tactical day to day, but I'm one of those people I can absorb a large amount of information and see the patterns that are across them,
Yeah.
and so I've spotted some trends before they were trends, right? I mean, I literally dropped out of college to start my first company. I started a digital agency in New York in '95 when people were like, "What the hell is the internet?" Right? And they had
Yeah.
no idea what it even was. And I remember being told by executives at companies you know their names of that the whole internet thing was a fad and it was never going to pan out and it was such a waste of time and a waste of energy and all those things. And I've repeated that multiple times in my career. I was a
Mm,
early advocate for open source software, and then I ended up helping to run and scale one of the first real breakthrough open source projects that converted in Acquia and Drupal, and then doing it at NGINX. I was early to cloud, and actually cloud monetization was how we solved for making money out of the Drupal project, which at the time people thought we were crazy. Our investors thought we were crazy. Like they didn't see
mm,
that as a path forward. And AI, like I started investing and advising AI companies now 8 years ago. Like even as the LLMs were emerging, when we were trying to do a lot of this stuff with natural language processing and image generation and all those other things that we were doing. And so I think I've been lucky in that I've been able to look at a couple of those scenarios and find a way to build a business within that. But I will tell you what I think I've been really good at when things have been successful is finding the right people to work with. Because I think the breakthrough at the end of the day with this stuff, first and foremost, and I had great advice from Tom Bowen, former chairman of Citrix, was on one of my boards. Tom said to me once, he said, look, the very first measure of your potential success is going to be the TAM of the category you're in. So like, if you look at a category and it's got a really great TAM, you can make a lot of money, right? If it's got a really tiny TAM, you're going to really struggle. And so I think, I made some good choices there around, is there a real business in this space? But really, when I look back at my successes, what it actually drove the success was a really strong, driven, smart leadership team who knew how to make decisions and drive a business together, right? And that's what made the difference, right? I've been in companies that were phenomenal products in a phenomenal category and didn't make it, right? Because they couldn't figure out how to operate and execute on a day-to-day basis. And flip side, I've been in companies with relatively mediocre products, good products, but not anything that you'd say, wow, that was the scientific breakthrough that was going to rule it all. But we just executed every single day, worked our asses off, and we saw the outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Walk me through, like, your first few companies. Like, I was looking through it. I think you were acquired by Omnicom, right? 1996. So you mentioned like your first startup was like 995, and then you got acquired. I think it was Spiral Media, and then your second startup as well, Cyberlight, was also acquired. Just kind of like, what do you think you did well there, right? Because you have a bunch of, obviously, of founders. B2B SaaS. Technically, you have a lot of them in terms of the full Sexio audience. They're kind of like figuring out. They're in the middle of it, right? They're kind of, pre-seed, trying to figure it out. Do we have, a problem worth solving for? Is anyone willing to pay for it? Do we have the right go-to-market strategy to go to the market? Like, is this a viable business that can raise venture-backed scale returns, right? So they're asking themselves a lot of these different type of questions. And then you have a bunch that are seed already that are picking up. But I'm interested more at that early stage where you're kind of starting yourself something new. You don't know if it's going to work out. Like, how do you navigate through those early stages? If you recall, like some of those earlier startups that you've done in the past, where you took them from 0 to literally 1 and then exit, like, what do you recall being kind of like your source of strength? Just kind of like power through, navigate through the difficulties, the overwhelm, the uncertainty. What were you doing? Do you think that was different back then?
Yeah. Well, look, I think you'll get a lot of advice from other founders, investors, executives about what you should be doing. And it gets really overwhelming really fast, like really, really fast, because there's so many things that you could be spending your time on, you should be spending your time on, and then everyone's got an opinion of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And most of that is usually a reflection of themselves, not even of you, right? And so I always try to bring it back to the basics, which is forget the trends, forget what everyone's really excited about in the moment, and forget even thinking about acquisition, right? Just, you got to get all that stuff out of your mind. The purpose of a business is to create and keep customer relationships, right? If you can create and keep customer relationships and you make those customer relationships valuable for everyone involved, you'll make money, right? You'll absolutely make money. And so I think what I did early in my career was I was ruthlessly focused on being a good customer servant, right? I really focused on what do my customers need, where is their pain, where is their opportunity, what are they chasing, and how do I just serve that really well, right? And how do I do that? And both of those acquisitions were Acquia hires and really buying our portfolio, right? They were buying our book of business, right? Yeah. And they were both rooted in what they heard from customers, interestingly enough. So the first acquisition, Omnicom heard of us through one of our customers, and they saw us very early, and then they saw how much traction we got in a very short period of time. That was all based on customers being successful, and that was a total curveball. We sold that business only a year and a half after founding, right? So it was a total curveball. And then the second agency was the same story. I literally was in a pitch for a piece of business, and I was pitching to the head of marketing and a few other people at this company, and one of the executives from the holding company that acquired us was in the room. They were in the room actually to evaluate the vendors, right? And that's the only reason they were there. They were really just to give feedback on what it was. And after the experience they saw with us and closing out that pitch, they came back to us and said, "We love what you're doing, and we want you to be a part of what we're doing. Like, we think you could be out front."
Yeah.
And I think
interesting.
in the software business was the same way. I feel like the software business, I've lived through subscription and consumption unit economics, and I've been in dev tools and cloud and all these very different businesses. And the thing that always stood out to me was, the market will move, things will change, but if you've got customers who adore you, you can do magical things, right? You can do magical things. You can adapt your products, you can pivot your business, you can, achieve the kind of GRR and NRR that makes a company look really attractive to investors. You can do lots of things. So if you're ruthlessly focused on serving your customers, everything else gets into line.
Yeah. I actually I thought that's really interesting that like they heard that they heard about you through your customer because of the work you were doing and so on. That's phenomenal. Before we go into Acquia, because I got a couple of questions about what you did there. One of the biggest things people were struggling with at the very beginning of launching a startup is just kind of like getting from 0 to 1. Never mind getting traction. Yeah. And in one of your first startups, you literally went from like 0 to 6 million revenue in your first year, and this is like decades ago, where like the equivalent of that, would probably be 3x today, right? Like 6 million back then, right? So just curious to understand, like, what enabled you to just get out just really just rocket through right out the gates? Was it just because it was so innovative? Was there like a specific approach to entering the market that you took at that time? Maybe something that could also be relevant for founders today, or was it just like less competition? Just trying to understand like what really helped you really scale so fast in year one.
Well, look, I think competition has always been fierce. I don't think that changes. I mean, I do think when venture capital became an investment class, that did change the dynamics really quickly, because you went from having single digit to low teens of competitors to having 20, 30, 40 competitors. Now with AI and how easy it is to spin up products and easy it is to get engaged, now you're seeing hundreds of competitors in a category. And so
exactly.
I think competition has always been fierce, and it doesn't get better, or it never gets easier. I think the way I've always been able to scale businesses early is really twofold. A lot of it is just relationship based, right? A lot of it is just leaning in, and if you really understand a problem to be solved, you probably also know the people with that problem, right? And so, I've been very lucky in early stage companies that I've been in to just be able to reach into my network and tell the story of why we were doing it, and see the outcomes from there. The other thing I think, as the people who are watching this are sort of thinking about this, if you're an early stage founder and you haven't gone from 0 to 1 yet, I think people undervalue their own networks, right? And people undervalue asking for people to get involved early, right? And those are two different tactics. I think reaching into your own network and saying, well, who in my network, either first degree or second degree or even third degree, fits this problem I'm trying to solve, right? Like, they don't do that. They expect there has to be some like structured sales motion, but almost all of those businesses where I did those early large deals, I did them myself. Right? I just went and talked to people, and I wasn't selling, right? I was going in and just saying, hey, this is a problem I'm focused on. This is a thing I think we can solve for. I see you, and I see your business, and I see what you're focused on. I want to help. And that goes a really long way. The other piece of this, though, around sort of asking people to get involved, this is a great tactic. Like, bring in customers as design partners early and don't charge them a penny, right? Reach out cold into certain companies that have this problem, or fit your ideal case, and say, hey, I'm building this product. I want people like you who really understand this and know the problem to be involved. Would you be willing to be involved, right? Because at the end of the day, until you really truly find product market fit, the revenue never scales, right? You're always kind of hunting. So you're going to lose money anyway. You're going to lose money in a bunch of salespeople, or you're going to lose money in a bunch of product development. I'd rather lose money in product development, right?
Yeah.
So I'd rather early on go and just give the product away to a select number of customers who can help shape it. And then here's the thing: once you've actually got a product running with them in production and they've seen success, then you just ask for them to pay you, right?
Yeah.
And that itself is a really strong litmus test, because if they are unwilling to pay you, then you probably aren't generating enough value, right?
Yeah.
So, but if they really are seeing something that's transformative to their business, guess what? They're gonna come back to you and say, absolutely, I will pay for this, and then they'll tell you what it's worth, right? Because they're design partners with you, right? They're early
Yeah.
with you.
Mm-hmm. What inspired you? At some point in your career, you pivoted to consulting, right? After already a few exits, you decided to kind of go into Capgemini, and then later on you went to Accenture.
Yeah.
What inspired you to make those movements? Is just kind of like more exposure, structured thinking, bigger, more clients? Like what? That's an interesting pivot from being an entrepreneur to get into consulting.
Well, I don't think of them as separate in my mind, honestly, right? Because
Mm,
I really have had sort of two, and now entering, I feel a third phase of my career. The first phase of my career was in services businesses, right? Early was
mm,
my own companies, right? Like,
yeah,
three dudes in a shared office space in New York, and then scaling, and then, doing it again with multiple offices and all these other things.
yeah,
When I left my own agencies and decided to go into management consulting, I was really drawn in for three reasons. One was it was still
mm,
entrepreneurial, because I was being brought in to build a practice, to build a new muscle inside of these consultancies. Like when I went to work at Accenture, we were doing marketing transformation using digital marketing tactics and data-driven
mm,
marketing and models even. Actually, we were doing really, really innovative stuff with models at the time, which only now some marketers are catching up to. This was over 20 years ago.
yeah,
So it was still very entrepreneurial. I still got to create, right? I still got to build a business. And but I also, the other two things about it that were really interesting to me was, first and foremost, being surrounded by some brilliant people. When you're in a really large organization like that, I mean, there's still a bell curve, but a large organization like that, you end up engaging
mm,
with some really brilliant people at your level, right? And so
yeah,
that was really, really exciting. And then the other piece of this was solving big problems. Like when I had my own agency, I would have to work my butt off to get even a tiny project at a Fortune 500 company. I
mm,
remember walking into my first pitch at Accenture, and it was to a CMO of a big credit card business. I knew their problem. I knew the solution to their problem. I did all my homework before I showed up. I come in, I start doing a credentials conversation with the CMO.
mm,
I get maybe 3 minutes into my credentials. He goes, stop, 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 stop. He goes, I know who you are. I know who Accenture is. Everyone says you have the answers. You don't have to pitch. What do I need to do?
mm,
And that was remarkable. Like that was a totally different experience than I had ever had. And
yeah,
so having the clout behind you is really powerful. Like that is really, really powerful. And I got to do really remarkable things with that CMO. And then I've worked in truly like top 10 brands in the world when I was in management consulting and in big agencies, because we had the credibility and I had the clout behind me and I could do that, right? And I wasn't a different guy, but the organization I was part of and the credibility that that gave me, and then the resources it gave me to execute on those visions, let me do some really remarkable projects. And actually, the work that I did in management consulting, and then I ended my career in services running the West book of business at Razorfish at its peak. It was this big independent digital
mm,
agency,
yeah,
40 routine accounts, like massive book of business. That work is still some of the work I'm most proud of, right? Because we
mm.
just got to solve really hard, really complicated problems for really interesting businesses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This question will be particularly interesting for folks more in the seed round and Series A round and full stack CEO that they've kind of like hit the $3 million like ARR mark. Maybe it was a lot of it was founder led sales, and now they're trying to really build like a sustainable business that they can scale, that's predictable, and so on. And in one of your roles at Acquia, actually, you came in as a VP and you helped the company, basically scale from 3 million to 100 million in revenue, and then later on, have an exit. Or got acquired. So that is definitely, what everyone is looking for, the road from, single digits all the way up to 100 million AR. Like, what, you know, obviously I can't remember now the amount of the timeline that you had during that time, but it was still a pretty short
Yeah,
stint in terms of like I think it was like three,
four
four
years.
years max or something. Yeah, exactly,
Yes,
right.
4 years.
So 3 to 4 years to get to from 3 million to 100 million is an absolute, you know, rocket ship. So just curious to get, you know, your perspective on any kind of advice you have for founders that are at that point where they're okay, founder led till 3 million. Now we really need to build a real business. I need to become a CEO. I need to really structure this thing, right,
Yeah.
and start scaling. What advice do you have for them when they're hitting that stage?
Yeah, look, the that was a crazy experience because at the time, in 4 years, basically we were having to reinvent the business pretty much constantly. Like the
Mm,
old arc pre AI used to be, you get up to, your first million is like impossibly hard.
mm,
And then that like 1 to 10 is one type of company and one executional model, and then 10 to 25 is its own, and then 25 to 100 was very similar, and then 100 beyond was a different animal,
yeah.
you know. And so, you think about that arc that we went through, and we were basically people talk about build the plane while you fly it. It's not even that. It's like living in a house that's under construction every single day. Like you're just having to constantly change everything. And I think what
Yeah.
what worked for us there and why it worked was we had an amazing interlock between product and sales. Like I think that was really the thing
Mm,
that allowed us to win in that place. I was head of product at the time. I've been in go to
yeah.
market and product roles in various points in my career. I was in head of product at the time. I had the most remarkable sales leadership I have truly ever worked for. Like
Mm,
these guys were incredible. Like they were they were driven, they were focused, they were super clever and creative, and they were
mm.
process oriented. And that last one I think is actually the thing that most founders miss because
Process oriented.
sales and marketing people will sell themselves very well. Because the first thing they learn to sell and market usually is themselves. But the characteristics that make an incredibly strong sales leader are this mix of, especially in that sort of run from that, first few million up to 100 million. It's this important mix of being able to
Mm,
sell yourself, right? Being able to actually go and engage with customers and be amiable and build relationships and all those things, but then also build the machine around you while you do it, right?
yeah.
And the most common mistake I see people make when they first start doing their early sales hires is they hire big game hunters. They hire folks who know how to actually go and just close deals, which works up to a certain size. But then they have to also be able to build a machine under them. And a lot of the folks can't do it. Actually, they don't know the machine. They don't even know why they win. They just go and
Yeah.
they just follow a pattern. And so, as you think about that scaling journey, you have to be really savvy as a founder and CEO to say, okay, well, is this sales leader what I need for today or for today and tomorrow? Will I have to make a change at some point? And what's really interesting is we ended up having multiple sales leaders at Acquia, and they actually were the sales leaders we needed at various points in the life cycle that we went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they never left. Their role shifted, right? And that was one thing that our CEO at the time did an amazing job of, was actually going and saying, okay, we're missing a muscle here. Let's add the muscle, not
Yeah.
decapitate and change the whole thing. Like let's add a muscle, and then look, your choice is you get to work with your peers on this and keep working in the business, or you leave. Like that's your choice. And some people have enough sort of self-confidence and lack of ego that they can do that. Others can't, right? They just can't do
Mm,
that. And I think in our case we were really lucky in that these three folks who ran the sales organization when I left, they didn't have that big ego about it. They were smart, they were creative, they actually didn't always see eye to eye with each other, but they saw each other's value. And
mm,
so we ended up executing incredibly well. But I think
yeah.
being sort of observant of what is the pattern that the business needs today and is prepping for tomorrow is the hardest thing that a CEO learns, and you can't do it on your own. Like you have to just get lots and lots of advice, and you have to get other people to engage you, and just you just have to observe. Like it's all first principles at the end of the day. Like you can't just repeat a pattern. It's all first
Yeah.
principles, but those first principles come down to, okay, knowing which are the right questions to ask as you design your organization.
Yeah, wow, Peter. I mean, I'm tracking time. I know we're almost there now, but like, obviously, like, we'll be bringing you on again. We'll be having a lot of different conversations, in the next 3 months on different topics, and I think there's a wealth of experience that you can share, especially even after that. Like, you've had like 4 stints later on, or 4 experiences as a CMO in different software companies. I think there's so much wealth that you can share there. But just, I guess, as we wrap up, like this kind of introductory call of welcoming you in part of the Full Stack CEO kind of like startup mentor ship. I love to understand kind of like what inspired you to join the team, and like how do you plan
Yeah.
on helping some of the founders that are coming pretty much from pre-seed to Series B, at the latest.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll keep it simple. All of the things that I did early in my career and later on, as I stepped into new roles or when I started new companies, I would have failed miserably if I didn't have people around me who had my back and wanted to see me win. And some were formal, some were informal, some were just people who looked at what I was doing and said, "Hey, I want to help." And without those advisors and mentors and coaches through my career, I never would have achieved anything that I would have achieved. Like, or it would have just been 10 times harder. And so,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in once you get to a certain point in your career where you can give back, then you should give back. And so
Yeah.
that was my motivation. I've been doing advisory for probably 15, 20 years now in various shapes and forms. And I thought this was a phenomenal opportunity to go and help early stage founders and just be able to provide them the additional perspective and coaching and advice that maybe will help improve their success.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I mean, they'll definitely need this kind of perspective you have. I mean, we're really growing a base here, and it's only going to be getting bigger and bigger. So really appreciate being a part of this. And I know we're at time, so I'll let you hop off. But maybe where can people find you? I guess is LinkedIn the best way, or is there a
Oh, no,
website?
LinkedIn. You're not gonna. My name is pretty unique, so there's not many of us
Yeah.
in the world. So you'll find me on LinkedIn and reach out. I'm actually more than happy to engage with folks. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. So through Full Stack CEO, through LinkedIn, we'll get you involved for sure. So thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate you being a part of the team. Looking forward to getting you involved, and have a great rest of the day. See you
Thank
soon.
you, Yannick.
Take care.